We often talk about the long game when it comes to publishing cookbooks. Today's guest pretty much sets the standard. Welcome to Everything Cookbooks, the podcast for writers, readers, and cooks. This is Molly Stevens, and I am here today with Kristin Donnelly. Hello, Kristin.
Hey, Molly.
So, big episode today, huh?
Yeah, we get to talk to Jacques Pepin.
I know. It's amazing. I don't know. It feels a little surreal. And I'm trying to remember how we landed this interview. It has to do with his foundation, the Jaques Pepin Foundation, which started in 2016. And they're doing a big initiative this year because Jacques turns 90 in December of this year, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, not only will that make him our eldest guest, but certainly has written the most cookbooks of anyone we've spoken to.
Yes, for sure. We did talk to Emily Megget, actually, who I can't remember if she was 90 when we spoke to her or not, but she was around that age. In any case, yeah, Jacques has written so many cookbooks. I didn't realize 35.
Right. And when we speak to him, he says it's not really clear because some of the books have been repackaged and,
True.
But over 30 original books for sure. Dating back to 1967, his first book, 13 PBS TV shows. I mean, he's won, I think it's 16 James Beard Awards, a Lifetime Achievement Award. Pretty impressive.
Yeah. And he's a delight.
Yeah, he is a delight. He talked about needing no introduction, but chef, culinary educator, television personality, artist. And that's one of the things that I'm really excited to share is that his latest book that came out in September is called The Art of Jaques Pepin, Favorite Recipes and Paintings from My Life in the Kitchen. And it came out in September. It's got over 100 depictions of his original artwork, paintings, drawings, sketches, sculpture, and he's interwoven them with his recipes in this new collection.
Yeah, it's just a really sweet book.
A delight. And we're very excited to share this interview with you. Jacques Pepin, welcome to Everything Cookbooks.
Thank you.
It's an honor to have you here. We have much to talk about, but we do want to start with your latest cookbook, your 35th cookbook, I believe.
Something like that, yes.
Something like that. The Art of Jaques Pepin, Favorite Recipes and Paintings from My Life in the Kitchen. This book came out as part of your 90th year celebration, and we're going to talk about that in the foundation. But I read a recent New York Times article that said you've published over 8,000 recipes.
I guess so. We started a couple of years ago, my son-in-law, Rolly, trying to compile all of the recipes that he could find from the beginning. And I guess it got to that number. I don't know. It seems to me a lot.
That seems a lot.
And I have, as I said, 30-some cookbook because each time I did 13 series of 26 shows on PBS. So each time we had a book. But I did 3 series, Today's Gourmet, like 20, 30 years ago. So that was 3 little cookbook. Then they put those 3 little cookbook into a larger book. So now I don't know whether I have 1 book or 4 books.
Right. So with all that collection of recipes and books, how did you go about choosing the recipes to include in this recent cookbook?
Basically, this is what happened every day cooking when I cook. I mean, throughout the year, I did the recipe really at home cooking. I mean, I was married 54 years, and for 54 years, we had aperitif at 6 o'clock at night, and then after we sit down for dinner with a bottle of wine, my wife and I. But so very often when I buy whatever fish or tooth, and I had a yellow pad, I took note when I cook something, and that was usually very simple. That's how I made recipe, and eventually Kelsey, or before that, Norma, would just type the recipe, and I edited it, and we started, and that process, which took a few months, and eventually we had enough recipe to do a book. It was a pretty simple way of doing it,
I love that. It's coming really from your real life.
Yes, I mean, I didn't really start sitting down and say, I'm going to write a book and write those recipes one after the other. No, those were usually incorporated in my life. And at some point, if I realized that I needed more of one thing or another, then yes, I would work on it. But basically, it was part of everyday life, So
that's a wonderful way to think about it. And the recipes are very simple. I mean, I'm thinking like the pork tenderloin with prunes. It's one paragraph and it's a full dinner. But then you also include some more ambitious recipes. And is that a reflection of sometimes when you're cooking at home, it's very simple, but sometimes it might be a stuffed lobster or a quail? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I have, as I said, many books, but the art of cooking, probably that we did in the 80s, we did 34,000 pictures in 5 years.
Wow.
We started, and those were pretty sophisticated. So it was one way, one type of cuisine, and certainly I may consider those two books, it's 2 volumes, as maybe the best book that I've done. I think it's certainly the book who sold the least of whatever I ever done. So, but I wanted to show, like, I have a pound here. I went in the pound to pick up frog, to show people how to take the skin out of frog and salt it. Oh my God, I will never do that. Well, it doesn't matter. You can start at picture 6 when everything is cleaned up and start cooking it. Or I did a whole lamb, baby lamb. Yeah, those 2 volumes, are more sophisticated. But it was another way of cooking. And we did a show on television. And in that series, my wife was with me in several of the shows. Yes, that was fun. That go back to the 80s.
Yeah.
There's so many beautiful works of art in this latest book. I can't even imagine what it was like to choose where everything goes. And so ultimately, how did you make those selections?
Well, that's a good point. I started at the beginning with maybe the idea of pairing some recipe with the painting, and it didn't work out. It didn't really make sense. So I only decided for the last chapter, the dessert chapter, to do flowers. Flowers will go with the dessert, but the rest of it, I didn't try to pair it because I couldn't. It didn't make any sense. And especially in that book, they decided to use drawing that I did when I was at Columbia in the early 60s, 62, 3, 4, thinking. So those are old drawing, sculpture, even they have some sculpture in there. And so it goes back a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I read somewhere that the first book you put some of your artwork in was The Essential Pepin.
So, yes.
I think so. There's some line drawings in that book.
Yes. Yeah, probably I don't remember.
But then in the last 10 years or so, your artwork appears more and more.
Yes, no question. I mean, I have lost some of my desire from cooking for some in the last year or 2 years too. So I probably get maybe more enjoyment now in painting than in cooking. I don't know, maybe the fact that, I live by myself now, so it's always more difficult to prepare a dinner, when you are by yourself. But yes, so I've gotten involved maybe a little more in painting than I used to. And also, I'm selling painting. And I have a friend of mine, I've been very, very lucky, because I would never have done a foundation, for example. My son-in-law did the foundation. Then at the beginning of the pandemic, my daughter said, could you do some show of 5 minutes, 3, 4, 5 minutes? And we have close to 2 million people on Facebook, and Claudine did that. I would never have done that either. I'm not too good at it. And then my friend Tom Hopkins, who shoots all of my book, we've been working together for 42 years. He's a photographer, taping, and so forth. He decided at some point to do an art site, and he's selling my painting. I would never have done that also by myself. And Tom did it, and now he's selling a lot of painting. I remember 40 years ago, I live in Madison, Connecticut. Stony Creek is a little town next to where I am. And somehow I knew the librarian there, and the librarian told me, would you be interested in doing a show of your painting? I said, great. So I had about 50 paintings, but the first time I bought, I think 4 cases of wine, and I start cooking, my wife too, and we invited all of our friends to come and have some wine and bite to it. And when someone said, oh, I like that painting, I said, okay, you can have it. I like that. Okay, you can have it. I never sold one painting. At some point, Tom said, no, I'm going to start selling your painting. And now he sells a lot of painting. I am amazed.
Wow.
Well, you've become known for your art now, too, which is, certainly when we first started reading your cookbooks, I didn't know you were an artist. And so I'm wondering, do you remember when you convinced your editor or you agreed to first put your art into your books?
Not really. I don't think I had much trouble with that because it was kind of minimal. At the beginning, I put a couple of painting in there. It was illustration. They say, fine. Yeah, but it became more and more. I enjoyed it. I mean, it's me in one way or the other. Whether I cook or I paint, it's something which satisfies me deeply at different levels. So, yes, it's me one way or the other. For me, there are similarities between the painting and the cooking. Some very often, certainly I'm more knowledgeable probably in cooking. I was in apprenticeship in 1949, so that's a lot of years of cooking and classic and my book of technique and this. So I certainly learned cooking more in depth than painting. I never went to that type of training and so forth. But I may start a painting very often and I don't really know where I'm going. But at some point, the painting kind of take a hold of me and I react to it. I do that without even trying to validate what I'm doing, but then just a question of reaction. And there is similarity in the kitchen like this when you cook. You taste, you adjust, even sometimes without even thinking about it. What people don't realize is that if you have a restaurant with a specialty of, a chicken with morel sauce, well, that same evening you may do 12 of that order. It tastes exactly the same each time. But if someone were to tape you 12 times, it would be different. Not very different, but 12 times slightly different because you react to the food. Maybe the chicken is slightly thicker or thinner, so you cook it 1 minute less without even realizing. Adjusting, you cook with gas, electric, copper, aluminum. So there is differences that you do, adjusting, reacting to the food. For me, that's the similarity that I have maybe with painting to a certain extent.
Yeah, each one's like a little, a tiny journey, I guess. There's something that is different about painting and cooking that you write about in the book about how a painting lasts, a dinner does not. Cooking is ephemeral. And you said that you love to be able to taste the food that you made 40 or 50 years ago.
Yes. I look at painting that I did 50 years ago, and I wouldn't know how to do that now. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad. It's just I don't feel this way at all. Of course, the food is very evanescent. You do it and it disappeared. So, but yeah, it'd be interesting for me to taste what I did when I was an apprentice or somewhere. And of course, the cooking was different at the time. Work at the Gradual in Paris. I mean, we were 48 chefs in the kitchen, and we never served more than 200 people. So it was a different world. The chef was certainly at the bottom of the social scale at the time. So the idea you go somewhere was not to kind of express yourself. Are you kidding?
Right.
You had to conform exactly the way you cook at the Plaza Athénée in Paris or Maxime Fouquet's. So you went there to learn. You didn't go there to change the recipe. You wouldn't have anyway. So it's quite different now that so many young chefs they want to express themselves. They want to. So it's a different world in the world of cooking.
Right. It's seen as a creative field.
Right.
Whereas in your early days, it was you were making something, but you were conforming to it had to be exactly like what the chef.
Right.
It's a different time.
Yes.
We were wondering, you can't taste that food that you made 40 years ago, but does a recipe act as a time capsule in a way for you?
I never really follow. I mean, the hardest part for me is to follow a recipe.
Yeah, right.
Things are different. In all the series that I did, probably the easiest one and the more fun was the series that I did with Julia Child, because we had no recipe. We decided the day before, let's do stew tomorrow, let's do one thing or another. So for me, as a professional chef, it's much easier. If the ingredients are on the table, I start cooking, I don't have to look. And I put scallion in that dish because they happen to be on the table. I throw them in. So cooking this way is more the way you cook at home by yourself, and it's more natural in a sense and more fun. Of course, it was harder for cameraman and so forth. They had no idea the right store. So, but it was fun. Yes.
Yeah.
Your early books, we talked about the art of cooking, but I think La Méthode and La Technique are two that you're really known for. And I was reading recently, Julia Turshen said that many chefs still rely on these books. They keep them in their kitchens. I know I did when I was teaching, referred to them all the time. I read that someone said it was like attending culinary school from your armchair. It was just what you're talking about. It's the technique, not the recipes.
Right. I mean, certainly Tom Colicchio is a big thing. He always told me he never went to any school. He had La Technique and so forth. But it's true. I did very structured and very organized. And in fact, it's in spring, in April, I think, they just got a note from the publisher. They are re-editing a copy in April to celebrate the 50th anniversary.
Amazing.
Oh, wow. That's great.
That's fantastic. Talk about backlist, right?
Yeah.
But since then, you really have structured your cookbooks around recipes. And I think one of the things that's really remarkable that you're able to do, even in this new collection, The Art of Jaques Pepin, is the recipes may appear simple on the page, but you've incorporated the technique in there?
Yes. I mean, the technique is always part of the recipe to a certain extent. I have several recipes, for example, with chicken leg, and I use usually thigh. And I used to do it differently, but now I cook it. I put the chicken skin side down on the table, and with a knife, I cut around the bone on each side about half an inch deep to open the bone to make it cook faster. And I put this chicken thigh in a skillet, non-stick skillet usually, even the cold skillet, salt, pepper, and I start on high heat for like 2-3 minutes until it's really frying. And then I cover it, lower it, and cook it for like 20 minutes this way without ever turning it or moving it, being covered. And because of the cut that I did there, the steam itself will cook the inside of the chicken and make it very moist and tender. So it's a technique there that I end up doing and then that I... So yes, yeah, there is a mixture of technique and the recipe itself.
Which one are they re-editing, La Méthode or?
Well, La Technique, really, at the beginning, Anne Bramson was my editor, which I met at Craig Level too, and her husband, Earl McGorner, was with the New York Times, and he said, "You want to do a book with us?" I said, "Sure." And I had started with Helen McCulley, was the food editor of McCall, House Beautiful, and so forth, and she kind of became my surrogate mother here. She lived next to me in New York, and so on House Beautiful, I started doing some recipe, or she wanted me to do a thing. I said, okay, I'll do some technique. So it was already like La Technique, but it was the side of a stamp, and it was in black and white, so you couldn't really see much. But I started doing that. So when he asked me to do a book, I said, yes, can I do a book of technique? I want to do. He said, absolutely. He said, how many pictures you think you do? I said, at least 500. He said, okay, that's fine. I get to 500. I say, can I do 1,000? He said, yeah, go ahead. When I get to 1,000, I said, can I do 1,500? So he said, that's it. But 1,500, I stopped, and I wanted to continue, and I didn't want to do La Technique number 2. So we find a synonym, La Méthode, and I did another 1,500 picture of... and that's why we put it together, the complete technique after.
Yeah. Are there techniques that you've embraced since then that you'll then add to that book?
Oh, yes, probably. I mean, I cook... I don't think that I'm very chauvinistic in that sense. So I may cook a lot of... I cook Chinese stuff and Mexican stuff or whatever. So certainly there I would have different technique. But the technique that I did there are more to do with a way of doing things rather than the ingredient themselves, and that's why they are kind of international. The way you sharpen a knife or peel an asparagus or whatever, it doesn't matter whether you do it in a Chinese style after or whatever. And that's why very often in La Technique, at the beginning, I didn't have any recipe. I finished the technique and I stopped there, peeling the asparagus. I didn't go on to do, which is what I did in The Art of Cooking. Another thing, too, is that I published La Technique in 1975, I believe, And the first edition of that technique, I had a big chapter in color picture in the center of it. I finish boning out a chicken, and I say, look at the page such and such for the finished dish. Well, they only did it for one edition, maybe too expensive. Then they remove all the color picture. They never remove the reference to it.
Whoops.
That's funny. Over the past 50 years, it seems like you always have a book going or have had a cookbook going.
Yes. That has to do with the television. So, because as I said, when I started television, I try with my knowledge of cooking, I try to focus that knowledge of cooking into a specific area of cooking. For example, when I did Fast Food My Way, I think I did 2 or 3 series of that. I wanted to show people to use the supermarket as a prep cook. I mean, in a professional kitchen, the prep cook come in the morning, he bone out the chicken, he bone out the fish, he slice the mushroom, he chop the shallots too. So I get there, I have an order for a piece of fish. It's right there. I pick it up, put some shallot on top, dash of white wine, bring it to a boil, cook it 1 minute. It's done. The recipe is done because I have all that prep in front of me. So I wanted to show there in those recipes, I used the supermarket, even the package from the supermarket. Boneless, skinless breast of chicken, pre-sliced mushroom, pre-washed spinach, so that within the 25 minutes of the show, 25, 27, I could do like 4 recipes because I used the supermarket as a prep cook. So that series, for example, was scheduled toward this specifically. And then I had other series which emphasized something else, so...
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting to hear all of this. We speak to many authors especially prolific authors who have a long career that work with co-writers and people who help produce their books, maybe do the food styling for their recipes, for their photo shoots. And I spoke to your longtime editor, Rux Martin, and I was sort of asking her about the team, the cookbook team. And she said Jacques is his own team. And that she mentioned you write your own recipes, you prepare the food for the photo shoots. She even said that if she were to call you with a question about maybe a measurement, was it a quarter cup or a third of a cup, and interrupted you in the middle of you preparing dinner for 1,600 people, you'd pick up the phone and answer her. So to remain that connected with your cookbook creation is remarkable.
Yes, as I said, but if you look at it on the other hand, if you do it in a much simpler way, as I think I did, if I'm cooking tonight for my wife, I have a beautiful, bass or whatever I may find at the market there. I say, let's do a recipe with that. So I saute it, adjust, put a bit of that. I happen to have some spinach or fresh tomato or something from the market. I add to it and I do a recipe there, So very often the recipe were done this way without much fuss. As I said, most of it except like the art of cooking, as I said, which were more sophisticated, of course.
Yeah. It's just so interesting. I shouldn't even say interesting because in some ways I feel like this is how it should be, where it's like part of life, right?
Right.
There is a way of making cookbooks now, just a very different process.
Yeah, no, I never sit down and say, I'm going to write a cookbook. No, the cookbook ended up part of my life on the next 6 months, whatever I eat tonight or whatever, it was just incorporated in my life tonight. I didn't sit down to write that cookbook. It just came part of it. So I adjusted the food depending on the theme of the book. I adjusted a little bit what we were eating at night, but it was always part of everyday cooking, So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. With writing your head notes, how does that work?
Usually, the recipe is done, and after I reflect a little bit on the recipe, and I say, in that recipe, I did this, that, to do a little introduction of, a few lines. Usually, it's a reflection of the recipe itself that if I think about it for a minute.
Yeah.
No, it's just impressed how you remain inspired and continue to learn. And you can see that in your recipes, these influences that certainly wouldn't have been there when you were writing when you first started.
Yeah, no question. But I mean, it's endless. I mean, the food, you can take a chicken and go to China and West Africa too and find hundreds and hundreds of recipes for the same ingredient if you want. And as I said, for me, I'm French, certainly, but I mean, what remains French with me, certainly, are the technique that we learn. It's ironic in the sense that the technique are not really recipe. Nothing to do. It's a way of doing things or handling the food or doing it. So I will end up, certainly, when I did an asparagus. At the beginning, I may have done that with a Hollandaise sauce or whatever, but then I end up doing that with a Chinese ingredient now and hot sauce and whatever. I still peel the asparagus the same way, but I think
we want to talk about the foundation, but first I'd love to just ask, I guess, how do you stay inspired?
if you're hungry,
Yeah, if you're hungry.
there's always a new ingredient, new thing on the table, say that's interesting. And or you get inspired, you go to friend, or you go to a restaurant, or you go somewhere or read something, think, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, you go from that, I mean, there is always, it's endless the variation that you can have with food, especially in America, probably more than any other place in the world. I mean, supposedly we have 24,000 restaurants in New York. So the amount of ethnicity, the amount of diversity, the amount of that you have there is endless. So you could go on and on writing cookbook forever.
Yeah.
Cookbooks and the TV show, it's just such a combination that you've done.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do you feel like one teaches more than the other?
Well, certainly, yes. I mean, the visual aspect of cooking, the technique themselves, when you see it, most of the time or very often when I do a class, I start by doing a butter roast. So I have a knife, I have a stick of butter, and I scrape it on top to do a butter roast, just to show the technique. I said, this people sit down, I said, put your knife this way, scrape it. Oh, yes, okay, fine. So you do it. I said, how long will it be if I have to explain that to you without any picture, just showing, scrape the top, you say, what the heck is he talking about? But you see, you say, oh, yes, right. So, the visual aspect is very, very important.
Nice.
The foundation, which was started about 9 years ago, I believe.
Yeah.
This year, you're doing a very big initiative, the 90-90. I know you're so busy. I can't believe you took time to speak with us. But can you tell us a little bit about what the 90-90, the home cook campaign?
Yes, again, those were ideas from my son-in-law, Rolly. Rolly is a professional chef, for 40 years now. I think he was a little afraid of me. Maybe not afraid of me, but he get married like close to 20, 25 years ago or whatever. So he moved to the West Coast. And then at some point, they came back here. And I remember at some point, I got a PhD. I got a lot of PhD from Johnson & Wales. So I was there with coming back from somewhere doing. And he said, your son-in-law is a chef. Would you be interested in teaching with us? I said, yeah, he's actually a very good teacher. He's very focused. He speaks well and so forth. So he was interested in this. So he came and he went to college. So he had a BA, I believe. But so I told him, if you are going to be in academia, you should go back to school. You won't pay for it. So eventually he got a master and he got a PhD. So he's a full professor now. Actually, his doctoral dissertation was based on, I think, our foundation to a certain extent, talking about a non-profit organization to teach people the art of cooking. So that was part of it. So he's the one who really worked on those. As I said, I would never have done those things myself. He's very, very good at that.
The initiative, you're raising money, the foundation raises money to help communities teach cooking.
Right. Because he told me when we started, he said, I look at the hundred and thousand of picture of book, Instagram, too, series that you did on television, teaching cooking, and in different schools. I mean, I was at the French Culinary Institute for 20-some years. I've been teaching at BU for 42 years, I think. So
you helped start that program, I believe.
Yeah, we started the program. So he said, who do you think you would teach now? And we thought about it, and I said, people who have been a bit disenfranchised with life, people who come out of jail, homeless people, former drug addicts, people coming out of the army. So that's what we decided to teach, because I feel that I can teach someone in 6 weeks how to clean salad and peel potato and peel asparagus, so that person in the kitchen, if they're interested in 6 weeks, they can find their spot in the kitchen and start cooking. And if they stay there and continue, 5 years later, that person is the chef there, in the restaurant, and you redo your life and all that. And so it's very rewarding in many ways.
That's great.
And then there's this campaign this year. It's 90 parties.
Right. And my son-in-law again decided to do 90 party for my 90th birthday. So we are doing, like I did at Donahue in Madison, Connecticut here, which is a little brasserie. So it's a big thing usually with all the wine included, with the whole thing. I do a menu and so forth. And I think it charged $200, and whatever come out of the benefit for that, they give to the foundation, or they give some of it, or they give whatever they want out of it. I'm saying that $200, but then we're doing it at the French Laundry in San Francisco, and it charged $5,000.
Right.
At Daniel in New York, she charged $2,500. And so it's totally different from one chef to another. I mean, it's been certainly very, very rewarding for me.
Is that Gaston?
That's Gaston.
Oh, we get a guest visit. I wish our listeners could see. We have a wonderful visit from Gaston.
Yeah.
We'll put all this in the notes for the show, but there's celebratejaques.org, and home cooks can have these dinners as well. And it's a wonderful resource. Like their menus, you could print your menu with a drawing, one of Jacques' artworks. And
Sarah Moulton did one at home. Dana Cowan did one at home. I mean, a lot of people do a little thing. I mean, it's very rewarding for me. People do that, but it's fun. I mean, food brings people together. There is no question about it.
And it's a wonderful, I was very impressed by the way it's all put together because, yes, a lot of these high, big name events will raise a lot of money, but it says if you just want to have a dinner and you don't even have to donate the money, just have it to celebrate this initiative. So I really encourage people to look at it. I know I'm going to co-host one up here in Vermont.
Good. Okay.
Hopefully we'll raise some money for the foundation, but it just feels like such a perfect way to wrap up this year, your celebration and this book, which is all about cooking for yourself and your family and people around you.
Yeah, I mean, in our era of political diversity and so forth, I mean, you go back to cooking together, bringing people together and so forth. There is no political implication in the kitchen, no racial implication. We have that label on our book which said everyone looked the same in the eye of the stove. It's true. So the kitchen does bring people together. And if I have 5 Republican and 5 Democrat coming to eat at my house, before they start arguing, I say, okay, let's finish that bottle of wine. Then we would have a nicer discussion.
That's wonderful. Do you have any advice for aspiring cookbook authors or artists, for that matter? Someone who is starting out wanting to write recipes and share them.
I don't know. When I published La Technique in 1975, there was, I don't know, maybe a dozen cookbooks was published in a year. Now it's like 1,000 or whatever. So I would tell people to stay very personal because, you cannot cover all base and doing everything. But if you're interested in cooking, if you're interested in writing recipe too, try to do it in a very personal way, something which is kind of unique to you. People will love it, and some people don't. It doesn't really matter. The point is that you cannot please everybody either. So you do what you feel you're happy with, something which satisfied you, something which reflects you, and so forth. And I think that's the way to go.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's a real pleasure.
We wish you a happy birthday. Thank you so much, Jacques.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Everything Cookbooks. If you have a question, comment, guest suggestion, or if you're interested in sponsorship opportunities, contact us through our website, everythingcookbooks.com. While you're there, check out our totes, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and other merch, or just buy us a round of coffee. For more about each episode, subscribe to our newsletter at everythingcookbooks.substack.com. Books mentioned on the show are available at bookshop.org. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave us a 5-star rating. Thank you, as always, to our editor, Abby Circatella. Until next time, keep on writing, reading, and cooking.